What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Altcoins are ripping, and we had to bring in Brendan to see what's going on in the crypto markets. Brendan, the people need to know, what are you seeing?
Yeah, that's right, Tevo. We are back, and the altcoin market is absolutely booming. And with this, we are seeing analysts come out of the woodworks with all sorts of bullish catalysts that are saying, hey, as we head into the last quarter of this year, especially in the next year, this is looking like prime time season for the crypto markets. We go over all the data, all the studies, all the charts. We even show some of the best performing altcoins over the course of the last week that everyone should be paying attention to.
We're going to show you some inside insight into what institutions are thinking. We also have some broader implications of how China has begun their own quantitative easing along with our Fed. Guys, listen, the timestamps are below so you can watch what you want to watch when you want to watch it. Please always remember, this is never personal financial advice. If you want that, you need a personal financial advisor. This is just information that we're finding, hoping to give to you. This is a huge connect the dots episode, so hopefully you can form your own opinions. We hope you enjoy the episode, and thanks for watching.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto Market Rundown, where we get to talk about everything that's happening in the great world of cryptocurrency, from the fundamental in the news to the technicals on the charts. We spend the time doing hours of research so that you all don't have to. And we are back once again with another action-packed week. There is pretty much news across the board. Whether you're looking at Bitcoin, altcoins, fundamental kind of developments, the TradFi space, there is something happening everywhere. And with this, the price of crypto is soaring. Most notably, one of the big things that we want to talk about in today's episode is the giant uptick that we are seeing in altcoins. I mean, we have most altcoins up double digits. We even have a few that are already up triple digits. So if you're wondering about what the hottest coins are, what, kind of industries are taking off, make sure you stay tuned for today's episode. But, Tevo, this is going to be a big week for you as well. How are we hanging in over there?
We're doing good. If you're listening to this on Wednesday or Thursday or even Friday, just shout out to me, credit to me, because I am officially in a evacuation zone for the hurricane that's barreling down the Gulf Coast of Florida. So if these airwaves are reaching your ears, absolute credit to me. I will do my best to get this out to you and then figure out how I'm going to stay safe. But that's not why we're here. We're here to talk about the markets. I can put away my anxiety for an hour here with you, Brendan, because yes, the markets are ripping. We're back. You were out last week, deep diving, looking at what's going on. You knew something big was going to happen, so you couldn't have the time for us to record last week. Brian filled in beautifully, but you are now back. We are seeing a lot of action, so it's great to have you here. And this is one of the biggest rundown prep sheets I think we've ever had, so it's going to be a good episode.
It is. It's funny because every week we kind of come in here and we're like, all right, maybe it can't be bigger than the last week. There can't be more going on. We'll do like a short rundown this week. That's usually how it starts because we've been doing these hour-long segments. And then we hop in, and then next thing you know, there's 100 different things happening that we just have to talk about. And we don't want to kind of miss out on the news. We want everyone to stay informed. So we really do put a lot of time and effort into researching all this, understanding it, and then bringing it to you for free. So with that being said, if you like the content that we make, if you like these rundowns, then leave us a review if you're on Spotify or Apple Music or Audible. And if you want to see the video counterpart to this as well, go over to our YouTube channel. It's Crypto 101 Podcast on YouTube. You can see us there. We got a lot of other great content as well. Of course, all for free on the YouTube. There you can see podcasts. We've just crushed a couple really big ones with 21 Shares and Tether and a bunch of other big names in the space. And so those are going to be coming out in the coming weeks here. And yeah, so quick little reminder, if you do want to see all the charts and articles that we're referencing, you got to go to the YouTube channel. But we encourage everyone to check us out. But let's talk about the altcoin space here first. I think that's probably what people are the most excited about. That's probably what people have a lot of their bags in. And so let's talk about altcoins, because altcoins are just ripping. There's a lot of volatility here, most of it to the upside. And the big kind of question that I've seen people have is this the bottom for altcoins? And the answer is, it very well could be. So to kind of recap everyone before we throw up the charts, The big developments that we saw was Bitcoin dominance hit a new high of around 58.6%. It's the highest level of Bitcoin dominance that we've seen. We've been tracking this, but it's the highest level that we've seen in the last several years, since around March of 2021. Now, we've started to see this retrace, and with that, Ethereum began to outperform Bitcoin. Ethereum dominance began to rise as Bitcoin dominance began to fall, and altcoins started going crazy off of this. Kind of especially in recent weeks, we've seen a couple of these crypto projects, as we'll take a look at, Sui being one of the most notable ones, but there's a lot of other ones out there like IMX and Maple, and even Render's recovering, and we're starting to see Aave is another great example of this, Helium in recent weeks. A lot of these projects just see these really strong moves to the upside of 50, 70, 100+% returns. And it kind of begs the question here, is the altcoin market pivoting? Has it bottomed, and is the bottom in? And the answer here is, again, we're not here to give financial advice, but it looks like we are sitting in a really good spot for altcoins to find a little bit of a rounding bottom. In fact, we're already seeing this happen, and many altcoins are crossing back through their 20 and 50-day moving averages. Those are curling back to the upside, which is kind of just showing a shift in trend. And with that, we're moving up to tackle some of our previous highs. Now, the kind of key aspect, the key attribute of a downtrend is lower lows and lower highs. What we're now starting to see on many of these charts is higher highs, typically about three higher lows, and now we're kind of retesting the area of retesting those previous higher highs, or those previous highs, to make higher highs. And so we are kind of trying to break out of this downtrend. So instead of making lower lows and lower highs on the candle chart over a longer period of time, we're starting to see higher lows, and we're now attempting to make higher highs for the first time on a lot of these altcoins. And I don't think that this is any kind of coincidence, because we're seeing Ethereum and Bitcoin behave very similarly. So those are kind of the big things that I'm looking out for here. I think the catalyst is just the markets returning back to normal. We saw this just huge move to the upside in Bitcoin over the course of 2022 and even the beginning, 2023 and even the beginning of 2024. We went into a pretty big consolidation phase after hitting new all-time highs. And now that we've consolidated for a bit, the markets look like they want to move higher. We are seeing TradFi, major indices like NASDAQ and S&P 500 kind of consolidate towards their highs. And now we're starting to see the same in crypto as well, which means that a lot of these risk-on investments or risk-on investors are a lot more excited about the market. And this is different from what we've seen in recent weeks, because in recent weeks, people were nervous. They were nervous about the election. They were nervous about potential policies on the crypto market. They were nervous about rate cuts. They were nervous about inflation and all these other things. And we've started seeing actually clear answers and even turnarounds, positive turnarounds in a lot of those concerns. Even on kind of the political front, we have a update into what's happening here about the conversation of digital assets, which we'll talk about towards the end of this episode. But the big kind of thing here is that a lot of the concern that risk-on investors had is dissipating, and they're being answered in a very healthy, positive manner, which means that these risk-on investors are coming back to the market, which is why we're seeing a lot of things push up. And, with this, I want to kind of go ahead and bring up the candle chart, but we are consolidating here very, very well. So let me throw this up, and everyone should be able to see it. But what we are doing is we are pushing back up to the top of Bitcoin's resistance. And if we flash up these shorter term moving averages here, you can see that we have this 20-day crossing upwards over the 50. Both of these are pointing upwards, just kind of showing that the trend is, the shorter term trend has reversed, which is a good thing. So I want to take these off just to make the chart a little bit more clear. But here we are on Bitcoin. We kind of made this higher low from this low of 49K, came all the way up to around 65K, came back down to 52K, put in this higher low, and now we're retesting the same high that we did last time before we rejected. So this is a previous high, previous area of resistance where Bitcoin struggled at. And now we're trying to break through here to the top of this overall channel that Bitcoin has been like ping ponging around in back and forth for roughly the last 6 or so months. And so as we come up here, Bitcoin is squeezing, it's putting a lot of pressure into this. This is a fairly large resistance area. And there's pretty much 3 areas that I would say left that every kind of investor needs to be aware of. Number one, the current level that we're at, right around 64, 65K. The reason for this is that it's a previous high. This would potentially confirm the trend reversal. And also, this is where we have the 200-day moving average and the AVWAP from the high, or the anchor weighted volume average price from the all-time high. We have both of those levels here, as we can see from the orange and yellow line. But we are consolidating. We're not seeing nearly as swift of a rejection as we saw last time. And I think that's potentially a positive thing. So I don't mean it's, I don't think it has to be all sunshine and rainbows. I wouldn't be shocked if we maybe pull back a little bit for another higher low. I think that that's still possible. But the overall trend here, and kind of what I'm looking at, is, things look good. Things look bullish. And we've been shifting our stance in recent months to kind of reflect this and say, hey, the bigger term, the longer term here, the midterm, it's actually looking really good for the crypto markets here. And now we're seeing a lot of that pressure build towards the upside. And so those following 2 resistance points, the first one being around 64, 65K, right where we're at right now. The next 2 would be around 70K, and then the all-time high around 74K, right? Because we've seen us kind of contest this rough, 70K area quite a few times in the past. This is kind of one of the last, final bosses, so to say, of resistance. And it's one of the big areas that I think people need to be looking at. So those are the 3 zones to the upside that I'm looking at. To the downside, if we do retrace to a higher low, I would imagine Bitcoin holding above the mid 50s for a higher low. I think anything kind of in that range could be a solid bet, maybe anywhere from 58 to 60K roughly. But I do think that the overall state of the crypto market is looking good. And, Tevo, I don't know if you're seeing any kind of sentiment shift, but it feels like morale has raised a lot, at least on social media from what I've seen.
Yeah, 100%. You definitely are seeing, more people saying that they're pre-rich instead of just being poor in the meme space. Pre-rich and Q4 bull run is a lot of the terminology I've been seeing recently online. But still kind of to the same point of that chart shows, right? The range is, I think, the people that have been around here for a while are optimistic, but not overzealous. Whereas they kind of know, like, hey, we've been in this range for a while. So as much as there's been a lot of positive price action, and I think the macro of Fed easing and all that is looking positive, people are hoping for more. They're thinking that this is just the soup and not even the appetizer yet for hopefully what's to come.
Yeah, and I think that very well could be the case. I have gone on the record saying I don't think it's impossible to see a 100K Bitcoin this cycle. I don't think that's a crazy ask. It's less than a 100% move. In fact, if we measure this out from where we're currently priced at, that's only about 57% to the upside on Bitcoin. Now, most people are going to say, Brendan, that's way too conservative, which I would probably agree with. But we're really not that far away. And that's the picture that I want to paint. 100K Bitcoin is only 57%. It's not a crazy ask. We've seen how the crypto markets have exploded in bull markets, especially with ETF inflows from Bitcoin. I mean, it went to an all-time high in the short little 2-month rally that we had towards the beginning of the year. And I think that we could see a lot of that continue to happen, especially as the market heats up. But I think some of the biggest beneficiaries can be altcoins. Now, I don't think every altcoin is going to succeed here. There's so many of them that exist these days. But I think a lot of altcoins are, have been suppressed. They've been down in the dumps of price. They have been slowly bleeding over the last 6 months. And now most of them are down anywhere from maybe 50 to 80% across the board. Some of the higher performing ones are doing better. But one of the big recoveries that we've seen here is Ethereum rallying to the upside about 20% in the last week or so. and now kind of trying to push back up to this area that was support, has turned into resistance, and it's trying to rival these areas so that it can make it back up to the 200-day moving average, like Bitcoin and a lot of these altcoins are at. And it just kind of goes to show that Ethereum's still pretty extended to the downside because most cryptos are on their way or working their way back to this 200-day moving average. And Ethereum's still pretty far away from it, kind of relatively speaking. Now, the cool thing is that when Ethereum had this uptick and it was outperforming Bitcoin, we saw Bitcoin dominance begin to fall, and it's still falling off this high of 58.6%. It's down a little over 1 percentage point. And this 1% drop in Bitcoin dominance over the last week or so was enough to make altcoins go wild. Here we can see that Solana rose about 20 plus percent. We can see that Near has been on a rise as well, about 40% in the last week. We can go over and look at Aerodrome, which over the last, maybe week or so, this thing is up. Let's see if we can draw it about 60%. Another one that we've talked about is Aave. Let's look at this thing in the last week or so, and it's done about 25%. Sui, which might actually have to type this one in, but Sui continues to rally. This thing's up about 70% in the last week. And so there's all these cryptos. Super is another one that we can look at. Super's up about 37% in the last week. Fetch is recovering as well. It's up about 38% in the last week. And so I bring up all these examples, all these cryptos that are hot because, and this doesn't even scratch the surface of all the other ones that are out there, because what we did was we just got a sprinkle, like a glimpse of what a fall in Bitcoin dominance could look like for the altcoin market. And that's what altcoins are doing. We saw a 1% drop in Bitcoin dominance, and there's some altcoins that are up 30, 40, sometimes 70% just in the last week. And so it kind of begs the question, if we go back to the Bitcoin dominance chart and say, hey, what if we really break down here like we have in previous market cycles over here, where it's just a death fall of Bitcoin dominance? What happens at that point? And that's where altcoins go 2x, 5x, 10x. Some will do 100x. And that's where a lot of the potential comes from. So I think that this is worth keeping an eye on. And we can see from things like the total 2 chart that altcoins really are moving back upwards. But the other big thing that I'm watching here, Tevo, and I'm going to move us from the daily chart, which is what we're looking at right now, for the Dixie or the DXY. And I'm going to move us to a weekly chart to see this a little bit more clearly. But the DXY has been something that we've mentioned, but it's been inversely correlated to the crypto markets very consistently. And with the DXY falling to potentially multi-year lows, the lowest point that this thing has been in well over a year, almost 2-year lows, I believe. And with it coming to this pivotal kind of level of support, if we crack here, if we see a breakdown through this 200-week moving average, and a breakdown of this major support area for the Dixie, then what that would mean is that if this tanks, it would likely be a good thing for crypto. Previous examples of this would be looking at what happened when the Dixie tanked over the course of 2017 to 2018 over here. Well, that's where Bitcoin went from a couple $100 to $20,000. What about over here when Bitcoin, or from the where the Dixie tanked from March of 2020 to 2021? Well, that's where Bitcoin recovered from around 4,000 or I think $6,000, and then it spiked, all the way back up. Right, this is where we had that crazy bull run where Bitcoin went up to around 60K. And so now we're looking at this again, and altcoins obviously went crazy over these periods as well. And we're looking at the Dixie trying to break through this pivotal level, and that could really heat things up for the crypto market as the US dollar currency index, or the DXY, falls over here. So there's a lot of catalysts. I didn't want to talk that long about the charts. I wanted to wrap back to this a little bit later on, but there's just so much going on. There's so many things to be excited about. And, that's kind of the high level overview that I have here, Tivo. But, the other kind of cool thing, or I mean, I don't know if this is cool, but it's something that was big in the news, was that BlackRock, they were having potentially issues with Coinbase. There was rumors circulating around that were just saying, "Hey, are you guys giving us paper BTC? Like, what's going on here?" And users kind of took this to the internet and they were saying, "Hey, like, what's going on? Are you not selling them real Bitcoin?" And so, for people who aren't familiar or aware of the situation, BlackRock uses Coinbase as their custody provider. They are the exchange partner of BlackRock for their Bitcoin ETF. And so when people are buying and selling this BlackRock Bitcoin ETF, they are going through and kind of executing these orders on Coinbase. And there was rumors circulating around that Coinbase was running out of supply, or that they were selling and buying paper BTC, and that caused people to freak out and panic a little bit. You know, People were asking the question: is there already a supply crisis? Which is something that we've looked at, and I think a couple months ago was probably the last time we looked at it. But we've looked at what the on-chain activity looks like for Bitcoin and how much Bitcoin is actually circulating around out there, how much Bitcoin is on exchanges, and that number was getting smaller and smaller and smaller, because people were putting it in the long-term storage. In fact, we were just talking to uh, who was it, 21 Shares, and they were saying that a lot of these ETF, traders or investors rather, they're long term. They're not looking to flip this over the course of a day or a week or a month. These are long term, typically multi-year investors, which means that a lot of the money that's getting bought up into these ETFs are long term investors who have no plans to sell. So it's essentially removing it from the active supply. Anyway, BlackRock came out and they said, "Hey, we are going to now be demanding that there is a 12-hour Bitcoin withdrawal window for Coinbase." And what that means is that when they're executing these orders, there's now a 12-hour window. There's no, "Hey, all these orders happened. We promised they happened. We'll send you proof and everything next week." It's like, no, you have a 12-hour window to make sure that everything is accounted for. And that's a big deal, because if there really is a supply crisis, like people are speculating, if Bitcoin really is becoming scarce because so much has gotten sucked up into these Bitcoin ETFs, and if there really is a lot less Bitcoin circulating around than people think that there is, well, then that would cause mass appreciation. If everyone thinks that the max supply is 21 million Bitcoin, but in reality, several million has been lost, maybe several million more is long term holders. Maybe the active supply of Bitcoin is a lot less than that. In fact, maybe that's something that we'll look at next week, or we'll even try to throw it up today. But you can see the percentage of Bitcoin that has been active in the last like 30 days, 90 days, year, 5 years, 3 years, etc. And it's a shockingly low number. I think it was around like 30 something percent of all Bitcoin supply has been active in the last year, which is shockingly small. Our active supply right now, our circulating supply, I believe, is around 19 million. And with that, if only 30% of that is actually active, or maybe it's less than that, that's just such a lower fraction. It's a fraction of what we're expecting. So, essentially, if there is a supply crisis, it would be good for the appreciation of Bitcoin, because Bitcoin would thus be getting a little bit harder to get your hands on. Tiva, did you see any of this circulating around on Twitter? I know there's a lot of disgruntled people about it.
Yeah, I think people didn't really know how to take it. It was there was like mixed reviews online, and because people were like, "Oh, is this mean Coinbase is or BlackRock's worried Coinbase is a bad actor? Is this bad for crypto? Like they don't trust Coinbase, or is it maybe more like you said, kind of painted like a bullish sentiment, like, oh wow, is this something that we're monitoring, that supply is that low that we could be going into some type of supply squeeze, right? And that's the whole theory behind Bitcoin, is there's only so many, we can't, press a button and create more Bitcoin. So yeah, there was really mixed reviews about this. And I think it's down the middle. I think Coinbase kind of just, you kind of have to do what BlackRock says, right? They're your number one
Yeah.
partner in the ETF space. So yeah, I don't think it's a big deal. I definitely think it was interesting, especially on the withdrawal side. It's like, hey, you got 12 hours to give us yeah, 12 hours to give us, our Bitcoin and finish the trades. But, I think for a big institution like BlackRock, I don't think that's a crazy ask either, especially when, the promise of crypto and Bitcoin is fast, easy access to your money. So I think it's all fair game.
Yeah, I would agree. All fair game, and the news doesn't stop there. Some of the other things that we've seen here is just more kind of, I guess, bullish foundation, bullish structure for the current state of the market. And we'll flash it up on the screen here. But yeah, as you can see, there's been some analysts that have been doing studies saying, hey, Bitcoin's poised for a breakout here in quarter four. And the kind of catalyst for this is that institutional demand and innovation is surging across the crypto markets. Now, what does this mean? Well, institutional adoption is a topic that gets thrown around a lot here. If the big money, the smart money, these giant firms and companies, if they all start getting more interested in the crypto markets, which it seems like they are, then that could be a massive catalyst moving forward. Now, what we actually talked to the to 21 Shares about yesterday or a couple of days ago, whenever it was, that's going to be airing soon. Again, I urge everyone to watch this episode. It's going to be awesome. But one of the cool things that they talked to us about was that institutional demand and the whales, the demand from the whales and the institutional and the big smart money players, they typically open up to the idea of something new, something like this, from an ETF standpoint, around a year after it's out. They want to make sure that it's tried and tested and safe and consistent and that it's not going to blow up in their face. They want something that has been through thick and thin. And that's why they usually give it about a year to work itself out before they bring in their large amounts of money. And that's something that we had talked about, I believe, with either the Bloomberg intelligence guys or the head of Bitwise, another ETF provider for Bitcoin. But 21 Shares are saying, yeah, we see the same thing. A lot of these big players, they want to come in a year after these ETFs have been around, specifically Bitcoin. And that's when they're going to bring their large amounts of money. And this kind of backs up the idea of what that article was talking about, saying, hey, Bitcoin could be poised for a breakout, especially as we're moving into the end of this year, especially going in the next year, because that's when a lot of these bigger risk on investors are going to eye up Bitcoin because it's kind of reached that 1 year mark, or it will reach that 1 year mark in January. To kind of take this even a step further, CryptoQuant says that Bitcoin supply and profit levels are signaling the potential for further gains. Again, just another metric, another piece of data saying, hey, things are looking optimistic for the crypto market here. And I would even go so far as to say there's not a lot of bearish activity happening. A lot of the ill will actors, a lot of the negative things that could be or have happened crypto, we're just not seeing it anymore. A lot of the space is positive, whether it's a news or a technical or a fundamental or whatever kind of way you want to look at it. Things are looking a lot better here. So lots of kind of fuel to add to this bullish fire, Tevo.
Yeah, and I think an important point to make around the price and all the bullishness is, and we've mentioned this on the show before many times, is that don't forget that Bitcoin is access to your money at all times. And I think that there's a window here with, around both the US election and just in general around the world with all the hot zones, that there could be times when something happens in the world where there's a sell event, kind of like we had with the Nikkei trade in Japan, and Bitcoin is going to be volatile, especially if something happens over the weekend, right? Because you can access Bitcoin on Saturday at 3 p.m., whereas you can't access your Apple stock at Saturday at 3 p.m. So, we're trying to set the tone here that, again, long term, we're extremely bullish. There's a lot of huge players that are also that way. So we're painting that picture for you. But, be aware that volatility is in the markets. Obviously we teed you up earlier this month that September was looking like a volatile time. That came and went, and now kind of back to it in its range. But yeah, I personally think that it's never going to be straight up. That there's always going to be times of high volatility, and I think that we're definitely in one of those time zones now with just not even the economic side of the world, just the how the world's operating currently.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, something cool that we haven't really seen before, kind of on top of all this, is that Benchmark was coming out and saying that MicroStrategy could soon be generating a yield by lending out its Bitcoin. So, if you're not familiar, MicroStrategy is one of the largest holders of Bitcoin. You've probably heard of Michael Saylor. He spearheads MicroStrategy. But as one of the largest owners of Bitcoin, they're constantly looking at new ways to stimulate the industry, generate some more profit, generate some more revenue. Um, and with this, since they own so much Bitcoin and they have no plans to really get rid of it, what they are potentially looking into here, and they could do, is actually start lending out their Bitcoin for a yield. Now, this would allow for more liquidity. Remember earlier we were talking about, hey, is there a supply crisis? Um, are there issues on that front? Because that could create liquidity issues, which would, in theory, raise the price of Bitcoin. But if they're going to do this, this could actually stimulate liquidity while also helping contribute to the overall crypto ecosystem. And it's still allowing the price of Bitcoin to appreciate. And it would also allow them to earn quite a nice yield. And this isn't anything new, right? We've seen lending in the crypto space for years now, going way back. I mean, I think we've had lending in the crypto space for probably at least 6, 7 years now, minimum. And this isn't anything new. So while this is really cool, I don't know if we've seen a TradFi institution do it quite like the way that they are potentially aiming to do it. But when it comes to lending out cryptocurrency, this isn't anything crazy. I would be interested to see what these rates look like and what the yield would look like and stuff like that, because it would be cool. And it doesn't seem like it'd be something where the average person like me or you, TiVo, could lend out our Bitcoin through MicroStrategy. I think it's only them using their extensive supplies through contracts. But I'm interested to see how this works. Is it going to be a traditional lending model? Are they going to be using smart contracts to kind of facilitate this? I guess we'll learn more as it comes forward. But considering how much Bitcoin they own, even if they're only earning a couple extra percent on that, then that could still equate to just millions and millions of dollars. So, a cool thing. I'm interested to, yeah, kind of see what happens.
100%. Michael Saylor's come out and said that MicroStrategy, as much as they do have the software side of the business, he wants to turn it into a Bitcoin development company, and so I think
Yeah,
that's at the top of the list of acquire all this Bitcoin and then figure out unique ways to basically build a new industry around it. So I think that's exciting to watch.
definitely. Well, we want to move on to some of the TradFi news that we've been seeing. Again, we like to correlate everything back to the crypto markets and how it could potentially impact the holdings over here in the overall industry. And Tivo, this is one that you kind of put me on, so I'll hand the baton back to you. But China potentially begins quantitative easing.
Yeah, not even potentially begins. They did. So China this
Yeah.
week, 2 days ago, I believe, or this week, whenever you're listening to this, it was Tuesday, the 23rd of this week was a rate cut in China, and it was, I think, double, basically kind of similar to the U.S. where they were debating 25 or 50 bips for our Fed, and they did 50, which was a true debate. I think in China this was an unexpected, higher cut than anybody was really seeing. And again, the summary of it, obviously, we're not tracking the China markets by any means, but it's the same theory. And I highlighted this here is that, cheap capital is going to flood into the markets from around the world. So the US is cutting rates, China is cutting rates. We're putting in liquidity into the global markets, and that liquidity has to find a home. We say it all the time. We need hard assets. Your dollars, you showed the strength of the dollar is going down. So we need hard assets. And you can have a debate of what you think the best hard assets is. Michael Saylor, for example, his number one hard asset in the world is Bitcoin. But stocks, houses. When you have cheap capital and cheap borrowing costs, flooding the markets with money, they have to find a home because they can't sit in cash anymore. So there's a lot of theories that all this capital is going to find a home, and more than maybe in the past of this type of institutional capital, which we highlighted in the beginning of the show, might flow to Bitcoin.
Yeah, and that's coming from, that's not coming from us. That's coming from Pomp, Anthony Pomp, who's a longtime investor, big guy in the space, saying, hey, this is the effects that this stuff could have. I'm kind of really just a seasoned veteran when it comes to the financial markets and in crypto. And so I think it's something worth paying attention to. And again, more fuel in the bullish
Right.
rocket to send us to the moon, right?
And it's the perfect rundown episode to listen to. I think we always do a good job, but this is the one because we said our rundown sheet was so big. It's like what we try to do here is connect the dots. If you take every segment that we've done, we're 30 minutes into this show already, and we're about a little more than halfway through, but like just go back and connect all the dots that we teed you up for the last 30 minutes. If you connect them all together, that's how we're forming our opinions. And just trying to educate you guys of what's going on, TradFi, crypto, economics, worldviews of like, all right, here's how you come up with a strategy, is gathering the information. And that's what we try to do for you.
Yeah, and I think that's the mistake that a lot of investors make, is that they use a single point of data, or they maybe use two different points of data. And I think one of the best things that you can do is look at a bunch of different points. Look at 10 different points of data, put all the puzzle pieces together, and then see what see what you come out with. See how you decipher that. If you just look at a single point of data, you're only going to get part of the story. You want to put the complete story together, all the information, all the news, all the fundamentals, all the technicals, everything. Put it all together, then create your kind of like educated decision on the matter and your investment thesis moving forward. And I think if you only use a single piece and you don't connect the dots, you really put yourself at a disadvantage.
No, 100%. And we can connect some more dots right now because we're not one sided. While we feel like maybe in the political space we've leaned one side because only one camp, the Trump camp, has been talking about crypto and Bitcoin. This week, we've had the Harris camp actually make their first comments on the digital asset space. And I note that I say digital assets because here's a little headline I can't get past the paywall here. Shout out to Bloomberg, but Harris vows to aid AI crypto sectors in pitch to NYC donors. And I know that's not a great screen share, so I'll take that off. But she did not say crypto. So here's this isn't my opinion. This is what was said. Is she said AI digital assets. We're going to help build these products and keep investors and consumers safe, is kind of what that speech was about. And she did not specifically say crypto. She said digital assets, and Twitter or X was not happy with that. They wanted her to say specifically Bitcoin, to specifically say crypto. We have not heard that yet, but I think she's getting a lot of pressure. One of her big surrogates for that campaign is Mark Cuban. And Mark Cuban, as much as he's a ride or die right now with the Harris camp, one thing, and same thing with Scaramucci, right? So Scaramucci is firmly in the Harris camp. One thing that I know they're both clamoring for, both on social media and I'm sure during their calls with the team, is digital assets, crypto. So I think that's exciting. I think that's exciting to have people on both sides of the aisle continuously talking about crypto.
Yeah. And I think that they kind of have to address it at this point, because around 40% of Americans already own crypto, and we can even up that number even further and say, hey, 63% of Americans hope to obtain crypto over the next year. And that was a study that came out in June of this year. So it's a fairly recent study saying that 40% of American adults own crypto and 63% hope to own it in the next year. And from a political standpoint, that's a huge number. If you put yourself in a non-favorable position to 40% of the current audience, potentially even up to 63% of the current voters, that's not something that you exactly want to do. And I think that they're realizing that, so they're starting to address this. I think they're going to continue to talk about it, and we'll see what comes out. But Yeah, it's interesting that crypto has become this big political issue, which I don't think people really thought would happen this soon. But it makes sense because people have their hard-earned money in this, and they're investing in it, and they don't want it to just disappear.
100%, and we'll build on that with that's the top of the presidential ticket. Both camps are talking about this space, and then if you go down to the Congress level, it's also there. The Senate level, it's also there. Our friend, friend of the program, Gary Genlsler, was on the Hill the other day this week, absolutely getting roasted by multiple members of Congress, and it took the timeline by storm. So I was actually going to share. It's a 2-minute clip, and I just think it's important for the people that aren't deep diving on the internet like myself to see this stuff. I think it's important for the people to hear how some of the representatives of our country are speaking to the SEC chair, who has obviously been a huge roadblock to the industry with different laws, regulations, and lawsuits to a number of companies, including Coinbase, Robinhood, name it, Uniswap, whatever. So let's listen in here. This is Tom Emmer, who is absolutely barbecuing Gary Genlsler. So let's tune in.
It's been recently reported that Vice President Harris has finally said she'd craft clear rules of the road for the digital asset space if she becomes president. Is this your approach too, sir? Or do you think she's rebuking you because she doesn't think you've done a good enough job establishing these clear rules over the last 3 years of her administration?
I think that there's laws in place. If Congress wishes to change them, they'll change them. But we are enforcing the laws, and there are many people in this field
so you don't
that are
think
not
she's
following
rebuking
the laws.
Reclaiming my time. Well, it's very interesting that you view your performance that way, because we have a litany of court cases, extraordinary confusion in the marketplace, and millions of Americans pining for clarity from you. You've abused the agency's enforcement tools, and you've even baited companies eager to comply with you, only to hit them with enforcement actions. You've retaliated against businesses and people who have come before this committee to talk about the next generation of American finance. And perhaps, somehow, worst of all, you've made up the term crypto asset security. This term is nowhere to be found in statute. You made it up. You never provided any interpretive guidance on how crypto asset security might be defined within the walls of your SEC. Yet, you made the broad proclamation that you believe a majority of tokens are crypto asset securities. You did this, and you deliberately used this made-up term as the basis for your entire enforcement crusade over the past 3 years, only for your lawyers to retract it in a footnote to a court just last week. Your inconsistencies on this issue, sir, have set this country back. We could not have had a more historically destructive or lawless chairman of the SEC. And I yield back.
So as you heard there, Mr. Emmer absolutely barbecuing Gary on he wasn't on trial, but just on the Hill. And he said, you couldn't have had a more destructive and lawlessness SEC chair, was really the quote that hit me there at the end. And I think it's important there. And that's not the only one, dude. Yesterday, there were multiple clips of multiple people going at him. And I think that's basically, if you take it at face value, what these people are is they're representative of the constituents. So, again, is everybody super excited and on the crypto train? Absolutely not. But I think it's important to see that, this is happening in our government. And so there's a huge push for this industry to move forward. And I think that's, again, connect the dots, overall bullish narrative. I think that's exciting to see.
It's interesting because they made really good points. Like, he has kind of just gone on these tangents and my favorite part of it was with companies that are eager to work with him. Like, we've seen Coinbase and a lot of these other, even Kraken and some of these other exchanges and crypto companies be eager to work with the US government, literally begging and pleading, saying, please give us clear regulation. We want to be compliant. And they're not alone. There's a lot of projects out there that want to be compliant and they want to be regulated. They want to do things the right way, but they just can't, or they won't. And because of that, they get slapped with fines. Even the ones that, like, I think Coinbase is the best example because they were approved and regulated by the SEC to be a publicly traded company in the US. And then shortly afterwards, they were getting slapped by the SEC saying that they were doing and performing like unregulated actions and this and that, and that they were doing illegal things. And it was like, well, you were the ones who authorized them in the first place. So like, what's happening here? And I think they made a really good point about that. And I'm glad that we're finally getting answers, because I think the more clarity that we get on the space, and the more that, Congress seems to really be realizing it, that things have not been run correctly, and crypto specifically just has not been treated correctly over the last couple of years. It's been a witch hunt from Gary Genlsler ever since his buddy over at FTX let everything collapse. And now we're starting to see people kind of wake up to this. And, it looks like we're coming in with some potential good foundation moving forward, which I think is a great sign. And it just goes to show that even Congress wants to see things done right. They want to see it done right from a legal standpoint. They want to make sure that, the U.S. thrives from a financial standpoint. And the best way to do that is to just have clear regulation. Doesn't have to be as bullish and positive as we want it to be. But if it's clear regulation, then at least the companies can have some sort of foundation to build on without the worry of getting sued and getting ran down by the SEC. So definitely a lot going on. Quite the bullish week here in the crypto markets. And so as we begin to wrap up, truly keep an eye, especially if we do see a pullback or a little bit of a retracement. Keep an eye on the crypto markets, especially altcoins, as they could be some of the more undervalued potentially assets here. If we do see the top of Bitcoin dominance, if we do see altcoins kind of start to put in a rounding bottom here, like some of those charts that we looked at earlier with Sui and Maker and a lot of those other ones, then they could be at a really potentially great point moving forward. So again, we're not giving financial advice. I just think that the altcoin space is worth paying attention to. I'm not saying to buy it. I'm not saying to sell it, but I'm just saying, hey, if there's a time to watch what's happening in altcoins, I think it's around this point in time. There's a lot of catalysts that could potentially feed into it positively. And, that's kind of my approach to the market right now is keeping a little bit of a closer eye on Bitcoin or on altcoins as opposed to Bitcoin, when over the first half this year, it's been very much the opposite of that approach. But that's going to round us off, everyone. Thank you all for joining in. If you like the content that we make, consider hitting that like button, that subscribe button. If you're on Audible or Spotify or Apple Podcasts or anything like that, leave us a review. We love to hear from all of you. The good, the bad, the funny, we see it all. So we love everyone's comments and activity. And quick little reminder here that if you want to get more plugged in, check out some of the links that we have in the description down below. Check out the Crypto 101 podcast on YouTube. And with that being said, we're going to be back at the same time, same place next week.